Hey, stick around for my interview with three wonderful paralegals from VanDerGinst Law who will discuss the joys of paralegalism. Hi, I'm Dennis VanDerGinst. Being an attorney, I know that the law can get confusing. In Legal Squeaks, we provide you with useful and easy-to-understand squeaks of information on legal and consumer issues that you can apply in your daily life. Let's get started. Hi, welcome to Legal Squeaks. I'm Dennis VanDerGinst. Before we get started, I'd like to remind you all to please subscribe or register for Legal Squeaks on your favorite podcast platform. Ask your friends and family to do so as well. By doing that, you'll be sure to get notice whenever the next Legal Squeaks drops. Also, you can suggest topics or guests and watch video versions of this and other podcasts from Legal Squeaks on legalsqueaks.com. Today, I'd like to welcome three guests to Legal Squeaks. Christy Healy, Lucy Reyes, and Raven Hollenhorst are all current paralegals at VanDerGinst Law. We often get inquiries from people interested in the paralegal profession. What does it take to become one? What do you do? How do you enjoy it, etc.? So we thought we'd take this opportunity today to address some of those issues. Before I let the ladies have their say, I'd like to explain the historical role of the paralegal and how it kind of evolved over the years. Obviously, each law firm might have their own distinctions and nuances as far as what they require of a paralegal. But historically, a paralegal was someone who had been trained to conduct legal research, draft pleadings, work on litigation, discovery, prepare witnesses, and assist attorneys in very substantive ways. The distinction between a paralegal and a legal secretary was sometimes subtle, but a legal secretary would be more involved in the organization of files, the typing, the filing, keeping attorney schedules, scheduling people to meet with the attorney, keeping the docket, things of that nature. But with the growing usage of the internet, we've seen more and more a development of a hybrid between legal secretaries and paralegals. In fact, years ago, I used to be an adjunct professor at a college that had a paralegal degree, and I told those students back then to be very careful about putting all their eggs in one basket as far as paralegalism was concerned, because as the internet began to grow, its usage began to grow, you would see that more and more attorneys were requiring less and less of paralegals. Because it would frankly take less time for an attorney to do their own legal research with the internet than it would take to explain to a paralegal what it was that they wanted and wait for them to get it done. So it became more important that in order to be marketable, paralegals also develop legal secretarial skills. And that, for instance, is kind of what we have in VanDerGinst Law. Now, there are also some other similar roles in most law firms, including legal assistants, who are typically considered a more entry-level position that helps both paralegals and attorneys and or legal secretaries, if there is a distinction in a law firm. And then there are legal clerks or law clerks, who are usually law students who are working through law school and helping in any of the ways that they are qualified at that point in time to assist within. So with those caveats and that introduction, I would like to take the time now to let each of these lovely ladies introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about your journey to the point where you are right now, something about your background and what it was that you were required to do to get to the point where you were a paralegal. So let's start with Christy.
So I'm Christy Healy, and I've been a paralegal for about 23 years now. I started right out of college with a general practice firm that I worked for almost 15 years. We did everything from family law to defense criminal work to bankruptcy, small claims, personal injury, work comp, real estate, pretty much everything you can think of when it comes to law. So I had a lot of experience in all different types. After that, I went and worked for about 8 years in a prosecutor's office, and which obviously only does prosecuting criminal. So I got all of that experience in being able to see a different type of law and only focus on one thing. And then I came here to VanDerGinst about a year ago almost, and doing what I really enjoy doing, which is the personal injury side of the law.
Okay, Christy, thanks. Raven, how about you?
So I got my start doing paralegal work during college. I was working on a bachelor's in English, which I did complete and has been really helpful with paralegal jobs. And I just found a part-time job listing for a paralegal job and answered it. And I ended up really liking it. So that first job I did was strictly criminal defense. We did like public defender, court-appointed work. And then as I got into it, things evolved, and I worked in family law, criminal law, personal injury. And I've taken some breaks from working in law firms and actually worked for domestic violence programs in the area and done some work with orders of protection and things like that. And then about 2 years ago, I found this open position at VanDerGinst Law, and so have really started learning a lot about insurance law and claims and things. And that's been really interesting, and I really enjoy that as well.
All right. Thanks, Raven. And last but not least, Lucy.
My name is Lucy Reyes. I've only been in the legal field for about 3 years. Before that, I was in social work for years and years. And I transferred into the legal field into a different firm where I was a legal assistant. And I did that for about 2 years, and then came here to VanDerGinst as a paralegal, which has been great because I've been able to expand my experience and get more litigation experience. Before I came here, I did strictly personal injury cases. But here at VanDerGinst, I've been able to get into some different areas, which has been really exciting with mass torts, some VA disability claims, and even helped a little bit with work comp. So that's been fun for me to experience different areas.
And to explain to folks who may not be familiar, the areas that Lucy referred to, mass tort, VA disability, work comp, et cetera, those are kind of still under the umbrella of personal injury law, but there are definitely some nuances that are distinct and separate from what you might typically think of when you think of injury law. Now, Lucy's journey is not dissimilar to that of a lot of folks that we work with. And of course, these are three of our paralegals, but we have many others that have worked here for much longer, some that may not have worked here as long. But it's not unusual in our office to have someone start as a legal assistant and kind of learn the ropes. As I mentioned, a lot of times, a lot of firms will use that position as an entry level or a jumping off point to either go into paralegalism or legal secretarial or some other area that the firm might require. So my question to all of you then is, I know some of you have had a more formal education with respect to paralegal studies, and some of your education has been on the job, let's say. What's your feeling as to where should somebody look to get the type of training necessary to be successful as a paralegal? Is it a combination? Is one more helpful than another? What are your thoughts? Anybody can jump in.
So I'm the one that has the formal education, which I received 25 years ago is when I started. college.
Let me stop you for just a second, but I should just direct who's going to respond, since listeners may not know who's speaking. So this is Christy now.
So, and I will say, when I went into college about 25 years ago, I'm sure that the courses are a lot different than they are now. I definitely feel like I got the majority of my training on the job. I'm sure there was things in the schooling that helped, but for me, on the job was where I got all of my experience. And I was lucky enough that the attorney that I worked for in general practice wanted me very hands-on. And so he, I think, did a very good job of training me, and I got a lot of knowledge from him. So.
Okay. Raven, what are your thoughts?
So I have a bachelor's in English from the University of Iowa, and I actually had started taking those courses with the goal of ultimately using it to go to law school. And I just never got there. But I do really think that the degrees helped me a lot. And I, at the time, didn't foresee becoming a paralegal. But a lot of the reading, writing, researching, sourcing your information, things like that I learned through getting an English degree have been really helpful, as well as a lot of our laws are based on like common law from, other countries. And so it's helpful to have taken some like ancient literature classes and stuff to, in the rare occasions that I'm digging around in those common laws and stuff, it's really helpful.
Because we all go around speaking Latin, so.
Right.
What about you, Lucy? What are your thoughts on this?
Well, I got my bachelor's in psychology about 20 years ago. From what I can remember, most of what I learned wouldn't apply very much to my paralegal experience, but my job after that, working in social work, helped me prepare for this job a lot, because it helped me develop my writing skills, listening skills, case management. I didn't start really learning the ins and outs of personal injury until I started my job as a legal assistant. But I think any program that encourages you to be a really strong writer, and any kind of job experience that helps you with developing good interpersonal skills with clients, whether that's in a medical office or customer service, I think that's going to be really helpful. It's going to translate to your job as a paralegal.
Yeah, and as an employer, I will say that, we have a number of folks who don't have any formal education in paralegal studies, nor do they necessarily have a college degree. I definitely believe that kind of formal education can be helpful, and especially when it comes to the need to research and write and do so well and grammatically correct and all that type of thing. But we've got some paralegals who did all of their training on the job who are phenomenal, and so I would suggest that it's never a bad idea to have your education extended and or to have continuing education. And that's something in our firm, and I know other firms, we encourage not only paralegals, but all of our staff and attorneys to have continuing education in order to enhance their abilities to help our clients. But regardless of whether you have that formal education or not, as long as you focus on the right things, you can still be successful. So that's a good segue into the next topic, which really I'd like to discuss. What are the right things? What are the skills that you guys have seen being the most essential and the most crucial in being successful in your job, either here or with any prior firms that you worked with? So we'll just go right round the clock. And Christy, what would you say as far as the skills that you feel are essential or helpful, and why?
Well, I definitely think customer service type skills are very essential and helpful. The majority of what we do every day is talk and work with clients, listening to them, helping them. So having those skills is definitely essential. Having patience to hear them out. I mean, you're listening to the worst day in a lot of their lives, and to be able to just listen to them. And sometimes, they cry, and you just have to be patient and let them kind of work through it the way that they need to. Also, just your general reading, writing, things that both Raven and Lucy have touched on. They're so important because you are drafting complaints and drafting demands and doing a lot of writing and even research and trying to find case law to support the claims that you've done. So all of those things are very important.
Okay. Raven, what do you think?
I agree with everything that Christy said, your customer service skills, and then also the reading and the writing. Organization is another huge, being able to organize yourself and being able to organize. Usually you're organizing the attorney you work under as well, getting things ready for trial, getting things ready for court appearances, managing files. In some instances, you'll manage a large volume of information or files. So it's really, really helpful to have organizational skills and systems for managing all of this information, because it will be a ton of information.
And Lucy, what would you add?
Well, I would reiterate that your communication skills with clients and with attorneys and adjusters, everyone that you come in contact with, are really important. You're going to have to listen for details and be able to ask the right questions when you're talking to a client to get the information that's going to be useful. And as Christy said, you do have to have a lot of patience because they're going to want to talk about things that might not be relevant, but that's part of your job and part of the experience to listen to the client and reassure them and make sure that they feel heard. Organization, I would agree with Raven. It's a huge thing. You will get lost and your clients will get lost if you don't have really strong organization skills. You're also going to have to be really persistent. There are going to be times when a lot of times when things just don't come easy. And that could be you're talking to medical providers to get them to respond to requests for records. It can mean just making sure that you're staying in touch with your client. And sometimes that's not always the easiest thing, and you can't just give up and let it slide. You're also going to, in my experience, you're going to be working with very little direction from the attorney. They're going to be depending on you to make sure all of the boxes are checked and that you're staying focused on the right details. So you're going to have a lot of self-motivation to make things happen.
And I will add, obviously, the way that what you guys are accustomed to and what we do at VanDerGinst Law is a little bit unique in that our focus is almost exclusively on personal injury law and those subsets of personal injury law. So, in addition, anyone who's considering becoming a paralegal, you need to kind of take a look at what it is you want to do, because what's also important, and I think Lucy touched on it a little bit, but you guys didn't really hit it too hard, is your understanding of medicine and medical jargon and medical records and medical billing and the coding and all those types of things. Extremely crucial in our particular practice. Now, it's not something that's going to be necessarily that important in another practice that maybe a general practitioner who does mostly family law or someone who does business law or something like that. But then each of those offices, I'm sure, would have other things that they would want their paralegals to become familiar with. One thing you guys did all hit on, which I will echo, and I think it's important in any law firm, is the need to be attentive to the client's needs and be compassionate and patient and understanding. And as I think Christy mentioned, you never know. This is usually going to be the worst day, or they're talking about the worst day of their lives or one of the worst days. Sometimes these people may not be able to work because of their injuries. And as a result of that, you might be faced with a whole other set of problems you have to deal with for them, including addressing the folks that might have liens for medicals, or maybe they're in danger of losing their home or their vehicle because they can't make payments because they can't work. Now, obviously, everything that is done by a paralegal is under the supervision of an attorney. So you have to communicate with the attorney. But as Lucy said, sometimes, the attorneys are in depositions, the attorneys are in court, the attorneys are not always available to address things immediately. And because of the nature of our practice and other practices, you have to be prompt in your response. You have to be attentive. You have to be very service oriented, because there are people who are relying on you, and you have to do it with a smile. These people have come to you because you've asked them to. You've asked them to put your trust in the firm, in the attorneys and the staff, including the paralegals at the firm. And so you want to show them that trust was warranted. So I always feel that it takes special people to work in a law firm in general. I happen to believe that we have a lot of special people that work in our firm because we are dealing with people who are in such dire straits that need to have the angels that are here on this podcast and the others that work behind the scenes in our firm and other firms that do such important work, which is also why I believe during the pandemic, attorneys and folks who did work in law firms were deemed essential, because there are so many things that need to be done to keep everything working in an orderly fashion. So enough of me getting on a soapbox about this.
Well, I do want to add something, if I can, to talking about medical records. If someone is thinking about going into personal injury, one thing to ask yourself is if you are someone that can stomach some pretty disturbing medical information or photos. I think that's really important.
For sure.
And also some ability or just knowledge that you're going to be working with people who might have traumatic brain injuries. That kind of goes back to the having empathy and patience with people. You're also going to have to feel comfortable working with people who English may not be their first language, or you may be working through a translator. You're just going to be exposed to a wide, diverse population.
Mm-hmm. For sure. And I will say, to your point about, knowing that you have the stomach for the medicine and the injuries that you might be facing in this type of law firm. Ironically, one of the reasons I didn't go to med school was because I was very squeamish, and yet I'm still doing personal injury work. So I think you can get past that. It does take a little bit of time to work yourself up to actually dealing with some of the more horrendous injury cases, and seeing some of the photos and videos that are involved in those cases. So I think you can do it, but you're right. You want to ask yourself if it's something you want to attempt to do to begin with. So now let's talk about a typical day. We've kind of alluded to some of the things you deal with, but I'd like people to have some idea as to what it is, and you can talk about what your typical day has been or what you might ordinarily do or see at VanDerGinst Law, but you can also talk about what you have done in other contexts, because, again, our firm is a bit unique in that our focus is exclusively injury law. Most firms are not just injury law. Most firms do, either general practice or business or real estate or who knows what it might be. So if you've had some background in some of those other disciplines, speak to that as well. So, Christy?
Well, first of all, I don't think there is a typical day in
Agreed.
any type of law. It's always different. Which is one of the great things about doing this job. But you've got your standards, you check your emails, you check your voicemails. But then it's just what you were working on. So a lot of times it's finishing up what you were doing the day before, which might be a demand that you've been working on for a couple of days. And so you're reading your medical records and putting together all of that. You may be in the middle of negotiations and putting together closing statements and discussing things with the client or an attorney, and just phone calls, talking to your clients and checking in with them, following up with medical records requests. There's just a little bit of everything.
Sure. Well, Raven, why don't you address it? And again, feel free to talk about experience elsewhere so that people would understand what they might be facing in the course of a day as a paralegal, no matter where they're at.
I agree with Christy. No 2 days in this job ever look the same. But I do I like to block my time. So I do have some, I do emails in the morning, I do phone calls in the afternoon, and then I try to keep my big projects in the middle of the day when my brain just happens to be firing the best. So a lot of times those big projects will be discovery responses, seem to take up a lot of my time, drafting demands, figuring out, kind of evaluating offers for the attorney so they can discuss them with the clients and see if it's a good deal for the client, if it's fair. I also spend a lot of time on just like basic file management, following up, making sure I tied up loose ends and crossed this T and dotted this I. So that's pretty much the way my day usually goes.
Okay. And Lucy, what would you add?
Well, I'm somebody that works best when I'm touching a lot of things through the day, touching a lot of files. Some paralegals might structure their day differently where they know I'm going to work on these 3 specific things. But my kind of case management style is to kind of keep a lot of plates spinning at once. So you're going to be, I handle a lot of documents, whether that's electronic or paper. You're going to have, that's part of kind of the, I can't think of what word I'm trying to think of. It's just kind of the maintenance of your job that you're going to have to do. It's kind of like putting gas in your car. To keep things going, you're going to be receiving, requesting, and following up on a ton of documents. Following up on things is one thing that I wish that I didn't have to spend so much time on, but that's where that persistence comes in. My favorite part of the day is talking to my clients and checking in with them.
It's not a happy hour afterwards.
Maybe leaving the parking lot every afternoon. That might be the best time. I'm an extrovert, so having that contact with clients and making sure that I'm answering their questions, and I just kind of get a little kick out of every time I can talk to a client and leave them feeling less overwhelmed and more reassured. So I do like talking to our clients the best. But I'm also going to be doing a lot of writing. Like Raven and Christy said, you're going to be writing demands. Right now, I think I have probably 6 or 7 demands in the works. Do also a lot, this is part of writing the demand, a lot of review of medical records. So sometimes there is a massive amount of medical records to conquer.
And just so the folks that are listening are aware, when we're referring to demands or demand letters, that is kind of the introduction into settlement discussions in a personal injury case. where, as the ladies have indicated, you pull together the medical bills, the medical records, lost wage information, anything that touches on the damages that a client may have endured as a result of an injury case. And then you lay it out in a certain fashion so that the insurance adjuster or the attorney or whoever is on the other side of the case can understand why it is that you are requesting a certain amount of money to settle the case. And that's referred to as a demand. Now, one of the things that I don't think we touched on when we were discussing, some of the skills, for instance, that would come in handy, that might be either essential or helpful, is the ability to, the computer savviness that is required. We use a case management software program, which helps us keep organized. It helps us have templates, for some of these things like the demands. It is a source where we can retrieve digital files, we can calendar, we can do things of that nature. With that foundation, let me ask you each, what advice would you give someone who is interested in becoming a paralegal? So, Christy?
Can you
Don't
come back
do
to me? No. I don't know. You can come back to me.
All right.
Let me think about that one.
Raven?
I would definitely say, read everything you can about, if you're looking at a specific law firm, get on their website and look at the attorneys, look at what their accomplishments are, look at what kind of cases they handle. If you're looking at a specific body of law you'd want to be involved with, read about it. So many times since I got into legal world, I've thought that this was a thing I wanted to do, only to, start researching that area of the law and find out that, it's something completely different. And I'd also say, talk to attorneys, because each attorney that's hiring a paralegal is looking for something different. So where your skill set might be just right for one attorney, it might be wrong for another attorney. But don't feel like if this is a thing you want to do and you don't have experience, you can't find a way in the door, because you can.
Lucy, what would you add?
I would say don't be afraid to ask questions, either before you get the job or before when you're just considering the field. Like Raven said, talk to attorneys, talk to other paralegals, reach out and just don't be shy about asking questions about that. And when you're interviewing and considering a position, ask a lot of questions about how they manage their caseload, how their paralegals manage their caseload. One of the things that I remember in our interview, Dennis, that really got me excited about VanDerGinst was that this firm has more of a team approach. There's a lot of interaction between the paralegal and the attorney throughout the case. In the last firm I worked with, the legal assistants were kind of working in their own bubble. The paralegals were working in their own bubble. The attorneys were working in their own bubble. And I really enjoy everyone working together. Again, I'm an extrovert, so maybe that has something to do with it. And then when you start
She's
a job,
trying to get a raise too.
No, I really do like it. When you start, don't be afraid to ask questions. I ask Raven and Christy and every other paralegal so many questions throughout the week, and especially when I started. Just don't be shy about that.
Well, Christy, now that you've had a time to think about it, what would you add?
Honestly, I don't really have much of anything to add. I mean, they both gave all the advice that I would give and did an excellent job at it. So,
what do any of you have regrets about becoming a paralegal? Would you do things differently as far as preparing for that career? Christy, I'll start with you.
No, I don't have any regrets. I absolutely love what I do. I love talking to all the different people, all the clients. It's hard and it can be difficult sometimes, just the job itself, but I also love the challenge and the complexity of it. So there's absolutely nothing I would change. And going into it, like I said, I started right out of college, young. So there's really nothing I think I could have done differently to prepare for it. I'm happy with how everything's turned out and how much I really do enjoy this field.
Okay, great. Raven, anything that you would do differently?
I think the only thing I would do differently is after, once you've been working in the legal field for a while, you start to realize that the information that you're working with, laws and policies and, insurance policies and things like that, they're changing all the time. Our laws change all the time. And so you're going to have a changing set of information. And I was really, when I was, first starting out as a paralegal, I probably wasted a lot of time looking at information and going back and looking at it again. Now, double checking yourself is great. But once you're secure that, you've found this information and you've stayed up to date on it, you kind of have to learn to trust yourself in, the information that you're working with and that you've spent the time to know your subject matter. And I wish I would have spent more time just becoming, more confident in the, the area of the law I was working in each time.
And Lucy, what about you?
I wish that I had started or looked into this field and considered it a long time ago. As I said, I was in social work for a really long time and felt like that was just my niche. But it's a better niche for me.
Good.
If there are any people that are in social work and enjoy parts of their job where they're helping people, but they're burnt out or looking for a change, I would say look into being a paralegal or working in the legal field, because I think it was a good transition. And I've been able to retain the things about that job that I loved, which was helping people, but you lose a lot of the frustration. Not that this is, sometimes you can, obviously there's frustration working as a paralegal sometimes too. But I would really encourage them to look into it. If you're thinking about making a change and you've been doing some social work or case management, I wish I'd done it sooner.
Well, I appreciate all your comments, and I think you've given some good advice. Before we wrap things up here, do any of you have anything else you'd like to offer? No? Okay. Well, in that case, thank you for joining us today. Again, please be sure to subscribe to Legal Squeaks. Also, check out our other podcasts, Uncommon Convos. Be sure also, if you want to suggest a guest or a topic on Legal Squeaks, go to legalsqueaks.com. Join us next week for another episode. In the meantime, have a great day, stay safe, and I love you all.